Hey there, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the podcast. My name is James, and I am your host. So welcome. If this is your first time joining us for the Satisfied Watch Collector podcast, just want to say thank you for joining. Please do like the video if you enjoy this type of content. I do create new content every single week, so also subscribe and leave comments. Leave comments about your thoughts on these types of topics. I'm always curious about. Today we're going to be talking about when should you buy yourself a luxury watch, and I think that there are probably a lot of takes on what this looks like. So I'm going to share several of mine and give kind of my overarching answer to start. So if you've not seen my channel, visited my channel, I just want to say again, thanks for stopping by, and I am a big believer in that I want you to know and love the watches that you have. I want you to get out of watches whatever it is that you want to get out of watches, because I want you to be a satisfied watch collector. We don't chase hype on this channel. We don't go after things just because they're popular on this channel. And realistically, when we say we, I mean me, because that's what this whole channel is about, is my collecting philosophy and how you may be able to apply it to your collection, whether you're just getting started or whether you're a very experienced collector and have a lot of time and different pieces under your belt. Obviously, I don't know everything there is to know about watches, but I do think that there are principles you can live by even when it comes to watch collecting, and I'm a big proponent and advocate of that. So when to buy yourself a luxury watch in 2026? We've talked about a couple of topics to start the year. I've shared about my personal collection, a little bit about my collecting journey, and shared some of the things there. And then we've also talked about my watch collecting philosophy and just what that means, what that looks like. I think there is a lot to be said there. I even thought about doing a second topic on that or second episode on that, because there's just so much. There's just so many different things that you can talk about when it comes to watch collecting. But I'll keep it narrow and try to stay on task today. So when do you buy yourself a luxury watch? I think back to when I bought my very first watch. Because the first watch that I got was a gift. I shared that with you as a Fossil watch. That was early on, probably in my teenage years. And that had a big impact on me. And then I think I was in my early 20s. I started to look at watches again, and just financially where I was at that point, I remember just trying to look and find what brands I liked. And I remember at that point, I mean, social media was obviously, it was there. It wasn't as big as it is today. It was probably in its early stages. So that likely had an impact on how I looked for watches. But at the time, I remember like in my late teenage years, me and some buddies, we would go to the mall a lot. And I just remember going to like K Jewelers and Rogers and Hollins, all those like weird little like boutique jewelry. I shouldn't say weird. That's not what I mean. But all those little boutique jewelers that they have in shopping malls. And I would look around at the watches that they would have there, and they would have like Citizen and Belova and Timex and like all these other brands. And I remember seeing a Movado watch for the first time. And I thought, oh man, that's really cool. Like it's got this little moon at the top at 12. Some of them didn't even have numbers on them or like anything to measure the time. And I just always thought, what a stupid idea. Why would anyone ever buy a watch to not be able to tell time? And, boy, was I naive in my collecting journey at that point, because there's so many interesting dials now. You think of something from like Moser, like a Vanta black dial from H. Moser and C. And it's like you can't see anything on it. It's just completely black. You can't even tell whether, if you can only tell based on where the crown is, whether it's upside down or not. But I remember seeing Movado for the first time and really liking their design language. I thought it was kind of cool. It kind of had this balance of like modern, they used some different metals on them, but very clean dial, very minimal type of dial. And so I remember I ended up owning 3 of them. I had the same watch in 3 different colors. It was a silver, a black PVD, and a two-tone of the same Lunosport model. I kind of shared that in my collecting story. But why did I buy one even to start. I originally bought the first one when I had an internship in college. And it was a big deal for me. I mean, I was really trying to get into my career. I wanted to do something with tech at that point, on the business side of tech, not like the crazy tech world side of tech, because that was still a little bit, not early, but I didn't know about that at the time. And so I remember getting the internship, and I actually bought the watch like right, I think, when I started the internship. So it was a little bit of a preemptive purchase, which I think is a theme for me. There have been times when I've definitely bought watches before I was really ready to. I mean, I was ready, but it was just before I consciously was like, this is the point when I'll buy one. And then I ended up buying it a little before that. So I think we all do that. I think we have moments, we have points where we have a timeline set out for ourselves, and then you get really close. And then that sheer excitement of being ready to like, oh, I'm just ready to do it. And you kind of do it a little bit early. And again, it's not the worst thing. I've done it several times. You just have to make sure that you're not jeopardizing yourself financially by doing that. So I remember getting this watch and wearing it all through my internship. And I remember there was a guy that I worked with at this internship. And because not everybody cares about these things, right? Not everybody cares about the brand of clothes you wear or the shoes or the whatever. It might matter to you. It might be interesting. You might be proud of something. It might just like the style, whatever it is. And I've always had a little bit of that sense of style for as long as I can remember, even though looking back at pictures now, it's like, my God, what was I thinking wearing that? I think we've all had those moments too. But I remember there was a guy that I worked with at this internship, and he was a lot older. He was a lot, along in his career. And his name was Renard. And I remember he would always joke about like the style that I had wearing my Movado and just that kind of, and we would just joke about it, right? And it was just a fun experience. And I remember that. I remember that really vividly. And it was one of those things when people talk about the experiences that they have along with a watch, that was my experience of Movado, was just him kind of joking, but not in like a mean way, kind of in a fun, appreciative way. About like the style of just having a Movado and, wearing like, I'm still a big like Oakley fan. So I wear Oakleys and, he just made a lot of jokes in a very like healthy and friendly way about it. Just that I kind of had some style. I still don't consider myself fashionable. I never will, but I think I've gotten better over the time thanks to the help of some, close people in my life. And so that was like the first time that I really bought myself a watch. And at that point, that was luxury for me. I mean, you were talking, I'm trying to remember. I think it was like $700 or $800, somewhere in that price range. And of course, that was when you could like get it on sale, right? They would like run a sale, and you could get a watch cheaper, than retail. Which again, being in the luxury space now is just kind of crazy, that's a thing. But that was a thing, and so that was like the first real time that I did it. And then I remember, many years later, I wore those watches all the time. Again, I had 3 of them, and I wore them all the time. I rotated them. At that point, I was really big on having a matching bracelet, so I had like a matching bracelet for a while. So I had a 2-tone bracelet, a silver bracelet, a black bracelet, and I wore those for years. And then at some point, I think I had shifted in my career a little bit. I was starting to make some more money, and I was also looking around at watches a bit more. And of course, I was into Movado. When I get into a brand, I tend to like get into it and go down the rabbit hole. I think when you're in those types of brands, you may not necessarily be looking at all the history and the heritage and those sorts of things that we do with like luxury brands. But I definitely remember looking around a bit and trying to get a sense of style that I liked. And so I kind of moved forward in my career, was making some more money, and I think I remember I shared the story about finding a black label Movado. And it was the first one that I had seen that didn't have a minute track or anything. It just had the silver dot at 12. But it had a disc in the center that was a date disc. But you could actually see it. It wasn't covered up like in a lot of watches where you only see the actual date that it is. It was a black dial. You see the silver moon at 12. There was a seconds subdial on it. I think it was, I don't remember if it was right in the center or if it was offset. I can't remember exactly where it was. Maybe it was kind of at the 4 or like 7 o'clock, somewhere in there. But I saw that watch and I was like, that's really slick. Black alligator leather. I had never owned like an actual alligator leather watch. And so I remember getting that watch and I was like, holy cow, this is really luxurious. It's very nice. And so that was, it was kind of a timing in life type of milestone for me. I think I was probably in my late 20s, somewhere in there. And so I bought that watch. And then I started to find nicer watches. I was actually Tim Masso's videos. If you don't know Tim Masso, highly recommend. He is an encyclopedia of watches, probably one of the most brilliant people in the watch space that I have ever seen, ever known, ever met, talked to, I guess, not met, but. And I remember seeing his videos, and that was what got me into luxury watches, by far, more than anything else. So that was kind of the milestones there. It was kind of along with work. The next one was pretty much the same. It was a combination of like financial readiness and work-wise for me. And then the next one was my Sky Dweller, the year that I was turning 30. And same kind of thing. I had been working, I had been saving, I'd been planning for it, and my birthday is later in the year. It's in September, and it was like April. It was right around the time of the pandemic, actually. It was like right before the pandemic, actually. It was when I started to like kind of seriously look. And so I ended up getting it shortly after the pandemic started. I remember that. But so it was an age thing, but it was also a financial milestone for me, and a kind of representation and concretization of what I had accomplished in my career up to that point. So I do think that there can be a lot of different reasons why you buy yourself a luxury watch. Clearly for me, there is a huge financial element. You got to be ready for these things financially, because if you are buying this and you're putting it all on a credit card and you don't have a plan to pay it off if you're putting it on a credit card, if you're doing that, let alone if you're just paying cash for it, that's still a big purchase. So you've got to be ready for these things, because the important distinction for me with watches is they've got to fit into your life long term, and they've got to be able to live within your financial goals that you have for yourself. And I'm a pretty ambitious financial guy. I mean, I'm not like, the next Jeff Bezos or anything like that, not even close. And I will never be that. I'm always going to work for somebody else. This is the closest that I get to doing something on my own. But I do think that financial ambition level, you have to know that about yourself, because that's going to be a big part of how you get to owning a luxury watch. So it could be a financial milestone. It could be age related. Could be promotion related at work. Could be associated with business or personal success, something like that. Then because the next big watch purchase that I made, so I got my Sky Dweller in 2020. The next big watch purchase that I made was 2 years later, and it was around a promotion. I got a promotion at work. My living situation changed a little bit. My overhead went down, and I remember it was the most money that I had made up until that point. And I was like, well, I don't know what to do with this. Better buy another watch. I mean, that's kind of what happened. It's kind of funny. It's a funny story, but that's basically what happened. And because it was very feasible at that point, because I was like, I really don't spend my money on much, even regardless of what my living situation was. I don't spend my money on a lot. I stay in a lot. I don't go out. I don't really spend money on crazy stuff, clothes. Like I just, I travel some now, but not that much. So that was a big milestone as well. That was when I bought my Yachtmaster 2, which is a fantastic watch. If you've not ever looked at the Yachtmaster 2, give it a chance. Give it a chance. Like, compare it side by side with a Daytona. There are some videos out there where you can see that happening, and just check it out. Because when I was really thinking about it and pondering, Daytonas were, and they still are, a stainless steel Rolex Daytona that retails for, I think, somewhere around 14,500, 15,000. Is currently selling brand new. If you buy a brand new box papers one, I think they're still over $30K. If you get one that's pre-owned, The black dial trades for less than the white. The Panda dial is the most popular, of course. The associations with Paul Newman and that whole story. And everybody wants one. Everybody wants one. And then you've got, on the other hand, you've got the good old Yachtmaster 2. This huge thing with a whole bunch of stuff on the dial. It's super busy, and yet I was starting to develop this kind of color scheme within my collection where I was really liking these blue colors, these blue tones, and white goes well with blue really well. I'm wearing my Dan Reuter right now, and that was the color scheme that I picked. It was a blue group watch, and I wanted the white accents on it because I wanted to keep it neutral within my blue collection. So the Yachtmaster 2, okay, let's just talk about it for a second. 44 millimeter case, flyback chronograph, which is actually a countdown timer. So this is not your traditional chronograph where you're counting up. You're counting down, and it's a 10-minute timer. I mean, what more useful thing do you have, whether you're at the grill, at the gym, waiting in an office? Just what more helpful and functional thing do you have than a countdown timer? I still love that watch. I still think about bringing it back into the collection at one point. For those of you who listened to my last podcast, I talked a little bit about being kind of like a one watch per brand guy right now. Maybe that'll change. I don't know. But, so I'm not going to go back to that right now. But it was such a good watch. And I wore the heck out of that thing with a rubber B strap. It just looked fantastic. So practical, so functional, and not really that huge, even though it was a 44. Wears about the same as the Sky Dweller does because the lug-to-lug dimension is the same. It's about 50 millimeters lug-to-lug, which is the same as the Sky Dweller, which is why I knew that I liked it and would like it and that it would fit well enough for me. So that was the next big milestone. Promotion, financially, again, I was just in a good spot. Wasn't, too big of a stretch for me at that point. And that was it was just such a high. That's how I think we get when we're in those places, especially when we get a new watch. The honeymoon is a real thing. If you've not experienced it yet, if you're just listening to this and you haven't actually, I would assume that if you're listening, and I could be wrong, comment down below, let me know. Do you have a luxury watch in your collection? Are you just looking, are you hearing about this for the first time and you don't have a luxury watch yet? Because there is a honeymoon period. There is absolutely a honeymoon period, for sure with your first watch, for sure probably with your next couple of watches. I think it still happens to some extent. Again, my latest is my Omega Seamaster 1200 meter Ploprof, and I try to be very disciplined about my rotation at this point. Plus, I'm also, making content and things like that. So I do try to rotate through my collection quite a bit because I also am a big believer that if you're not using something in your collection, what is the point of having it? So I do really try to give my watches all a lot of wrist time. But I got to say that just sitting here and having it, by me that I'm looking at it, I'm like, I really love wearing this thing. It's just super fun. It's huge. It's a beast of a watch, and it's great. So I would be honeymooning with it if I wasn't so disciplined about rotating through my collection. And you probably have your own version of what that looks like for you. So yeah, the Yachtmaster 2, that was a big one. And then, like I say, I bought an Omega shortly after that. It wasn't right for me, just for a variety of reasons. Then I was just in a collecting mode. I started to kind of get into that collecting mindset where you start to okay, I'm just going to explore brands and explore different pieces and find different designs that I like. And that was how I came upon JLC and, added another Omega and Grand Seiko and all those things. But as far as when to buy yourself a watch, those all come into play. All those factors come into play. I still think, going back to last week's show, budget is still the most relevant thing. But other than that, there can be a lot of different reasons why to do it. And then the story of Dan Reuter. I've got to talk about Dan Reuter because Dan Reuter does not get enough love and press and attention in the industry. If you have never heard of Dan Reuter, if you're like, who's Dan Reuter? Open a new tab. Keep me streaming. Open a new tab and go to, I think it's just ReuterWatches.com, I want to say. Just type in Dan Reuter Watches. You'll find it. Dan is one of the best dudes that I have ever met in the watch space. And he is a watchmaker. Like, he actually not builds his own movements because he's using, like ETA 7750, but he polishes, he puts everything together, he finishes the movement, and it is beautiful. Dan Reuter Watches. Check him out. You can buy his watches through his website. Follow his social media. I think it's just Reuter Watches. Instagram, Facebook. He's got, I think, all those platforms. Dan Reuter is just one of the best guys ever. I love my Sky Dweller. I've said that so many times, but I have zero relationship with Rolex. I don't even really have a relationship with an AD because my AD locally told me when I was looking for that watch, my blue Sky Dweller, they told me it was going to be discontinued because they hadn't seen one in like 9 months. So I said, well, I guess I am not going to buy from them because they don't have the watch that I want. It wasn't like, well, maybe I'll see if I can get something else. And like, no, I wanted a blue dial Sky Dweller. That's what I wanted. And so I don't even have a relationship with the Rolex AD. I really don't. Now I do a little bit. I got engaged last year, and so I ended up getting some jewelry that I actually needed, not something that I'm putting myself on a list to buy a watch with. But Dan is an amazing watchmaker, and I will tell you this story because it's one of the things that you have experiences in your life where you meet people and the way that they respond when poo-poo happens, when things happen, tells you a lot about them. So I remember, again, I'm part of Tim Masso's watch group. I've shared that, and I'm very open about that because I learned a lot from Tim. I still learn a lot from Tim. He's a great guy. So I'm part of his watch group, and for the first time, I see that they're doing a group watch. Dan and Tim develop a relationship, and however it comes to fruition, Dan ends up making Tim a watch that is really, really cool looking. I've never heard of this brand before. I've never seen it before. Tim loves racing green, so it's like a really, really vibrant blue dial with like green accents, and the strap has green racing stripe stitching, which just looks really, really cool. And so they release this and they start talking about it, and then they put the options up in the group, and it's like, okay, well, you can pick from one of these 4 options. You can get the Tim Racing Green, you can get blue and red, you can get blue and yellow, or you can get blue and white. And I was like, perfect. There's a neutral option. I can stay true to my blue collection theme and still go after this. And this is probably like, I don't know, maybe summertime, I think, of like 2022 or so. And so I put in, I can't remember how we were doing it. I'm messaging Dan or something. And I basically say, yeah, like I'm in, like I want one. I'll put down the deposit and, let's do it. And he was giving a great deal on them just for the group. So I still appreciate that, even just up front, right? It's probably about half of what the watch is actually worth, I think, which is just incredible. And so I put this deposit down, and then, I basically just wait because, that's how it goes, right? It's like you put your deposit in with these with independent watchmakers, right? You give them a deposit, and they say, hey, it's going to take 6 months, or it's going to take a year or 2 years, or however long it's going to take, and then you just wait. Some of them are a little bit more communicating about what is happening with the watch, where it is in production. Some I've heard can get really, really close to that, which is really neat. But with Dan, it was kind of like, here's the end product, so I just give you a rough time frame, and that's it. And so I had given him the deposit, and like probably 3 to 4 months after, I find out that I have stage 4 lymphoma. Like, what the heck? Totally out of nowhere. I didn't see that coming. That's crazy to me. I like to think that I take care of myself and, live a fairly healthy lifestyle. So, but here we are. And so I'm like, I feel terrible because I just know I'm going to have these medical expenses and all these things. And I'm just like, I can't do it. Like, knowing what's coming and what I'm about to go through, I can't do it. So I reached back out to Dan, and I really felt embarrassed, honestly, which is super funny to me that that's how I felt about it, because like you would think, okay, like, dude, you just found out you have cancer. Like, why are you embarrassed about that? But I was, because I take a lot of pride in like being healthy and living a healthy lifestyle. And then here I am with like this, not terminal illness clearly, because I'm still here, but it was rough. Like, it was not expected at all. So I reached out to Dan and I said, Here's kind of what's happening. I don't think it's the right time, basically. And he was like, not a problem. Totally cool. Hope you like, my gosh, like, I hope you are okay. And I hope you make it through this and like are well. And I just remembered that. I remember that to this day. And then, I go through this process of probably 8, 9, 10 months, something like that. Chemo treatments, the whole 9 yards, just not a fun experience. Like I do not recommend it at all. Make healthy lifestyle choices, get your sleep, eat well, exercise, do all the right things, right? And so I go through this, and financially, it actually ended up working out okay. Insurance covered a lot, right? Had a really good year financially. There was just a lot of things that happened that, I made it okay financially as well as physically, which is good. And so I get through, I'm getting to like kind of the tail end of it, and I'm kind of like, you know what? I'm actually in a pretty good spot, and I really want this watch. And I think it would mean even more to me now if I could get one than it would have prior, because now there's like a real story behind this that I'm going to remember forever. And so I remember reaching back out to him, and I kid you not, it was like, yeah, no problem. I'll have it ready. Like, that's so exciting that you're doing, like he was just so genuine, so genuine. And we see each other on social media all the time. We interact, engage a little bit. I'm always watching what he's doing. It's just fun. And, I remember like I got the watch, so jazzed about it. It's a super great watch, by the way. I'm wearing it right now doing this episode. So if you've not seen my review on my DR02, it's on my channel. Go and watch it. Yeah, I mean, I remember getting the watch, and then all of a sudden, like maybe a couple weeks later, I get this package from Dan, and it's like, okay, he already sent me the watch. Like, what is he sending me? And it was a winder. He sent me a winder for the watch that I bought. I didn't pay for it. I mean, he's just like sending me stuff. And then a little while later, he was like, he reached out to me, I think through Messenger, and he was like, hey, what's your sweatshirt size? And what's your favorite color? What color do you like? And I'm like, well, blue, what colors do you have? And then he sends me a sweatshirt. And I have this cool Reuters sweatshirt. I really need to wear it more often than I do, candidly. But it's really nice. It's got like an escapement on the front, and then Reuter, the branding. And it's actually very, very soft and like super comfortable. So I don't know if he sells that stuff on his website, but if he has, you should buy one because it's really comfortable. But it was great. And like, and all these straps, and I was like, hey, I'm going to this black tie gala where we wear red, and so like, do you have a red strap? And he sent me a red strap. Like, just so many cool things over the course of a couple of years of having the watch. And it's still, my favorite way to wear it now is there was an original strap that was a royal blue like the dial, and it had white stitching on it, which still looks fantastic. I found that he had a navy, like a darker navy alligator strap with a little bit lighter blue stitching. And it kind of matches, like the subdials of the chronograph are a little bit darker than the actual dial itself. So that's how I tend to wear it now when I'm wearing it like as a day-to-day watch. It is still, I can say this, it is still the only watch in my collection that gets wrist time every single day, because I often wear it on rubber, and I do wear it to the gym and my workouts all the time. And it's kind of my like go-to for anything that I'm not afraid of like beating it up a little bit, because I just love it. And I did ask him that question. It's 50 meters water resistant. And so I did kind of ask the question of like, hey, how is this like with water and doing all these things? Because I want to have something that's a little more durable and versatile, and I just want to make sure it can. And he has amazing stories of customers that use his watches for all sorts of different stuff. So very cool. Like I say, Dan Reuter, check him out. If this is your first time hearing about him, you should look at his stuff. Yes, of course, he's not a huge brand by any means, like some of the major brands that are out there, but the quality on the watches are fantastic. And I will say that I actually get more comments and compliments about this watch when I wear it from people who do not know watches than any other watch in my collection. Like, I have gotten so many just because the dial is so vibrant and there's a lot happening on the dial, but it still, again, has kind of a modern look and feel, and it's still kind of clean, even though you got a tachometer on there because it's chronograph, right? I still get more comments from non-watch people that are like, hey, that's a really cool watch. Like, what is that? Where'd you get that watch? Like, they have no idea what it is. They have no idea how much it costs, but I get more compliments and comments on that than anything else in my collection. So I just think that's really awesome. So the DR02, the Dan Reuter watch, will forever be my cancer, not survival. I don't want, that sounds really dramatic, but I overcame cancer. And, thanks to all the medical staff and treatments and all that sort of stuff, and my already pretty healthy lifestyle also helped. So that's a heck of a milestone. You're not going to, like, I hope that you do not have that sort of a story, that you have to have a watch that you remember it. But I will always remember that, sitting in the chair in a hospital, getting drugs pumped through my body and having that watch to appreciate. And of course, the nurses would always like get to know you and like want to know what's going on. And they knew that I was like a big kind of watch guy. And they're like, oh, what watch you got on today? And like being able to share the story of that was really, really, really cool. So with that being said, those are some of my reasons why I've bought watches, candidly. Those have been kind of the main throughout my collection. That's getting a little bit deeper into the why. So again, is it an age milestone? Is it a family milestone? Like I've heard a lot of collectors talk about, having kids, and my fiance and I, we don't want kids. That's not our game. We just are choosing not to do that. But that's been something that I've heard a lot of collectors talk about, was like, this was to commemorate my son's birth or my daughter's birth. And like, I don't have kids. I will never have kids, but I would imagine that it's at least as significant or probably more than, the cancer story for me. Like, I will always remember that, and it will always be something that was special to me. And that's how my Dan Reuter is for me as well. Promotions at work. I do think, again, you kind of have heard my journey now and the whys behind some of the purchase decisions, because so much of watch collecting is tied to financial success. It really is. Again, I've said this before, but like the fact that we are in a place where we are listening to, making, talking about, buying ourselves expensive jewelry or artwork, whichever category you want to put it in, means we're already in a pretty darn good spot. And so I do think that that's promotional, business success, those types of things will always in some way, shape, or form tie into your watch purchases. Because again, we all have limited resources. Like there's just only so many things you can buy. And so if you're choosing to spend disposable income on a watch, that's already pretty special. So make it something that you're going to really like and enjoy and that you can hang on to. And, we talked about budget. We talked about kind of the philosophy pieces of this and some of the principles. We talked about budget a lot last week, so I'm not gonna beat that to death anymore. But I do think the other time to buy a watch that I don't talk about a lot is if you come across a really, really special watch that you may only have one chance at getting. I do think that can be another time to buy a watch. And that is also a lived experience because, again, I talked about my Jaeger LeCoultre Master Ultra Thin Perpetual Enamel, and I never actually thought that I would have the opportunity to buy that watch. And so when I did, that's the reason why I don't have my Yachtmaster 2 anymore. It's the reason why I don't have one of my old Aquaterras anymore. It's the reason why I don't have my old Jaeger LeCoultre Master Ultra Thin Moon anymore. Or my Night Birch, Grand Seiko Night Birch was a great watch. So all of those things were reasons why I bought a watch. And I think that consolidating, or, some people talk about the exit watch, right? I don't know if that's actually true. Maybe there's some people out there that have done it. I don't know. I feel like people who usually exit tend to then find more watches to buy. So I don't know that anyone retires completely from watch collecting. Who knows? I mean, who knows where the journey will take me. But so I do think, those can all be reasons why, milestones why you can buy a luxury watch. And I guess to end the episode, I think I would also want to talk about when not to buy a watch. Because I think those are also real things too. And the biggest one is financial. there are there should never be a point when your need for a watch comes before your responsibilities as a adult, parent, human being, responsible citizen, whatever you want to call it, right? And I'm not going to get like, preachy or political or any of that stuff here, but we're talking about watches, y'all. Like, we're talking about little stuff we wear on the wrist. And if you are buying little stuff on the wrist, I kind of like that. If you're buying little stuff on the wrist at the expense of your bills, your ability to eat, your ability to support your family, or I'm going to even put this one in there because I do think it's important, at the expense of your long-term financial goals, which if you don't have any of those, you probably should have some of those. But I do think that's a mistake. I really do think it's a mistake. Now, what that balance looks like, I'm not going to try to tell you what it should or shouldn't look like because I do think that that is very unique to you. But point being, if you're putting all, and I've had this conversation with myself many times because this is something that I think if you're in this space, you probably struggle with to an extent, is to what extent do I go through this and put more money into watches, whether you look at them as, hey, I'm just going to buy this because I like it and I want to wear it, or whether you're one of those people that's kind of like, well, it's a watch, it's an investment. Don't invest your money in watches. Buy the watches because you like them. If they happen to appreciate in value, that's gravy. Try not to sell them because you'll probably lose money most of the time. But if you're putting watches in front of your financial goals long term, I do believe that's a mistake. And I do believe that sooner or later you will regret doing it. I do. I really do. And again, I've definitely stretched myself at times, but I've never put myself in jeopardy to buy a watch. And that's where I would kind of land on that as well, is you should not buy a watch if you're putting yourself in jeopardy in any one of those categories or in any one of those forms. So be responsible with your watch purchases. I'm not here to parent you. You're all adults. You make your own decisions. But, take lessons from me. There's always a, I don't want to say this in like a negative wishing, like bad things on you kind of way, but like there's always a cancer around every corner. Like if I would have just gone all in and been like, yeah, let's just do it. Like I could have put myself in a really tough spot. So that was the responsible thing to do, even though, like I say, I felt embarrassed at the time to message Dan and be like, hey, I can't do this right now. And so I do think that there are times when you should not buy a watch. And you've got to know what that is for you. Because life is long. There's a lot that we all want to do. We're ambitious people. It's why we're appreciating the fine quality luxury of a nice watch. And so enjoy it. Don't allow it to become, your master, or don't become a slave to it. If there's any Dave Ramsey fans, I'll give Dave Ramsey a shout out. Like, don't become a master or don't become a slave to what he talks about, right? Where it's like owning things to impress people that you don't know and that you don't even really like. Like, it's not worth it. And so just be cautious of that. I do think there's another deeper conversation to have about when you should not buy a watch. And that is, you should not buy a watch to fill a void of self-esteem for yourself. I really strongly believe that. If you are thinking that in some way, shape, or form, owning whatever the heck the watch is, whether it's a $1,200 Movado or a, $30,000 Patek, because if you believe that that will fill some void that you have, it will not. And I'm also really careful here because I want to keep this watch focused, but it won't. It just won't. Enjoy watches for what they are, and don't use them to fill a void of emotional dissatisfaction or personal dissatisfaction. If you are unhappy with yourself and you decide to buy a watch to try and get rid of that, you will be an unhappy self with a very expensive piece of jewelry. That's what I can tell you. So and that's all part of the journey and the evolution for me. And I think probably for many of you out there. So I just want to say thank you again for stopping by. And I feel like I talked a little bit less about like just straight up watch stuff today. So I definitely would love your feedback on that. Because again, I'm not here to preach. I'm here to talk about watches. This is a watch collecting podcast. But I also do think that there's an element of, there's a reason that I have branded this as the Satisfied Watch Collector podcast, or, that's the name of the brand. And that is because that's what I want for you. That's what I want for me. That's what I want for you. Is that's why I say every video, I want you to be a satisfied watch collector. I don't want you to feel that there's always got to be a next one and there's always got to be something else. And oh man, now this hype watch is hot, so let me go and, look at it and buy this one. Like, I don't want you to live your life that way in the watch collecting space, because it's miserable, honestly. And you can do it for a long time. There's enough content out there. I mean, even this podcast. Like, if this podcast is putting you into headspace where you're like, man, I got to go buy this hype watch, which I hope it's not doing, because I don't really talk about many of those, only as usually contrast and examples of watches that I think you should buy or may want. So you've got to be cautious with that, and that is where I think that the input that you have around you, whether that's watch groups or Instagram or continual videos, whatever it is, does have an impact on you, and you just have to be aware of what it's doing to your psyche. And maybe there's times to turn it off. I've gone through periods of that too, where it's like, I'm taking a month and I'm just shutting it down because I don't want to be in the ecosystem all the time. Because what happens inevitably, right? It's just like, I really like that one that this person like told me about or posted or whatever. Oh, maybe I should, like, you just get in that hunt mode all the time. And I think that it's okay to be in that mode. You just don't want to live there. And that's what the Satisfied Watch Collector idea is all about. So thank you again for coming by. I really do appreciate you taking the time. Please like the video. Comment your thoughts down below. I really would like feedback on the episodes if you do listen, especially if you're listening all the way through, because I want your feedback. Like, I would love to know what you're enjoying, what you're not enjoying, and if there's any other topics that you want to hear about. Subscribe to the channel. Please do that. I am continually working to expand my reach and bring this content to more people. So anything helps. And I just appreciate you for stopping by. So with that said, my hope for you is that you get out of watches, whatever it is that you want to get out of watches, because I want you to know and love the watches that you have so that you can be a satisfied watch collector. Thanks again for tuning in, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.